Secretary of State Antony Blinken is in Jordan as part of a week-long trip to the region in the hopes of calming rising tensions. But as today marks 3 months since the deadly attack by Hamas in Israel, that task seems easier said than done. On Saturday, Israel traded fire with the Iran-backed militant group Hezbollah, with both sides launching dozens of rockets across the southern border of Lebanon. Hezbollah claims it's retaliating for the killing of Hamas leader Saleh al-Aruri earlier this week in a drone attack in Beirut. Israel, however, has denied responsibility for the assassination. This is all taking place as we learn that Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin has been hospitalized since New Year's Day following complications from an elective procedure, including spending 4 days in the intensive care unit. The Pentagon waited 3 days to inform the White House's National Security Council of his hospitalization. Austin releasing a statement overnight, taking responsibility for what he says was his decision on the lack of disclosure. Joining me now is former Republican Congressman Denver Riggleman, who is also a former U.S. Air Force military intelligence officer. He's also the author of The Breach, the untold story of the investigation into January 6th. Denver, it's always so good to have you on the show. I'd like to actually start with this surprising news that just came out yesterday that Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin currently hospitalized. But this was information that wasn't even, told to his national security advisor for a span of 3 days. How unusual is it for this information not to be shared?
Good morning, Katie. It's not just unusual, it's baffling. Somebody who's a military officer like myself, and especially if you have people under command or people underneath of you that you have to actually pass orders, you want to make sure they know if you're in the hospital. So, and the fact that he didn't actually notify the White House is just a head scratcher to anybody in the military, especially at the higher levels, especially commissioned officers, especially individuals with a responsibility like former General Austin. I'm just, it's a baffling thing, and I'm just not quite sure why that decision would have been made.
So, Denver, let's talk about, while this is all going on with Lloyd Austin, what's happening in the Middle East, because that's really what's giving a lot of us concern. Since Lloyd Austin has been hospitalized, we've seen the following by the U.S. The U.S. carried out a drone attack on the leader of an Iranian-backed militia in Baghdad, Iraq. Bases with Americans have come under fire, and attacks against commercial ships in the Red Sea. I mean, what kind of impact could the absence of a Secretary of Defense have on our military's readiness?
Well, that's a fantastic question. You would hope that some of those strikes were pre-authorized. They were already in the works, which is what I would suspect happened. But when you don't have somebody in a decision-making capacity, somebody would have had to been identified, initially for that chain of command. So the thing is, even if, and here's the thing, Katie, even if he was hospitalized, he should have notified the White House immediately, because something could have gone wrong during the surgery, whether it's injury, whether it's incapacitation or something like that. So hopefully he did have somebody already making those decisions. But again, not knowing the chain of command at that time while all that is going on could be problematic. My hope is that there was some solid decision making. You did have an individual who knew what was going on and could make those decisions.
And then, Denver, let's talk about why Antony Blinken has now made his 4th trip to the Middle East in order to deal with is rising tensions in that area. Specifically, I want to talk about what's happening with Hezbollah in Lebanon. I mean, when this attack by Hamas happened on October 7th, there was a discussion about the fact that it wasn't just going to be the southern border of Israel that was going to be at issue in terms of Gaza and Hamas. We had to worry about what was happening on the northern border of Israel with Lebanon. I mean, talk about why the axis of resistance is something that Americans need to be paying attention to.
Oh, my goodness. That's a great question. Israel's very small. I've had the opportunity to go in the tunnels, Katie. As you know, I've been to Israel multiple times. I also have some pretty extensive Middle East experience. It's actually the confusion and the fact that I think a lot of Americans don't understand the Shia-Sunni split that's going on in this area, and how interesting it is that you have the northern and southern portions of Israel that really are surrounded by enemies, and enemies that are Shia or they're Sunni. So when you look about Salah al-Aruri, when you talk about that strike inside of Lebanon, you're talking about a Hamas leader who's largely Sunni being hit, right, and being protected by Hezbollah, or being there on the auspices of Hezbollah, which is Shia. So now you have all these individuals, all these groups that could probably, or most likely, Israel is their common enemy. But the issue is there's so many multifaceted interpersonal relationships. There's so many relationships between different groups. And let's go back to al-Aruri. That's why it was so important that Israel took him out, is based on his ability to do peacemaking and that type of interconnected type of, I would say, treaties or allying with other groups outside of his specific religion, outside of his specific political stance. And so you have this axis of individuals that are always looking at Israel as their enemy and their ability to actually attack them. The issue that you have, though, is that when you saw Soleimani's death, there really was no reaction from Iran when that happened. I don't see a massive specific reaction based on the assassination of al-Aruri. My issue is that it's a slow leak, almost a slow escalation to where there could be an explosion. But this actual assassination, I do think, could make this into a bit of a tinderbox, could expand, the regional conflict. And then what happens to the United States? How do we make a decision on what we're going to do with Iran, with Lebanon, with Syria, possibly getting in with the larger players like Russia and China, and with the escalation on Israel and having to defend, multiple spots along their border, and also a sort of a multi-pronged conflict that Israel is going to be a part of. I hope that helps. That was a lot, but I hope that helps.
No, it definitely does. And Denver, I got less than a minute. I did want to ask you the following. I want to talk about Yemen, because you didn't even mention Yemen. So you have the Houthi rebels that are being backed by Iran. And the common denominator here for Hezbollah, Hamas, Houthi is all Iran and others, right? I mean, so does the United States actually have a risk of getting more involved because of what's happening in the Red Sea? Because we already have seen actual interactions between the U.S. military and the Houthi rebels.
That's the issue that you have, right? When you talk about the escalation of the conflict, you're talking about targeted attacks in other countries, and you're talking about Yemen specifically. Now you have another issue, and you have Iran. You're having these actual passageways where you could have attacks where that could escalate to the United States. And how does that ripple effect? What does that cascading effect look like through all the surrounded territories of Israel, through Israel itself? And how does it look like with our allies? How does it look like with Russia? How does it look like with China? I think the fortunate thing we have is this: Gaza, Hamas has been almost obliterated. Hezbollah is probably going to test what they call strategic patience again. I don't see a direct attack, but Iran is the I would say, the main player that we're worrying about right now. Let's see how they react in the next couple of days.